Stuart Edgar. I'm the EGM of Vessel Services at MMA Offshore.
Okay. In your presentation, you spoke about the market in Australia, which seems to be a strong market. Can you give a little bit more details on where the activity is and what's happening with OSV demand?
Yes, certainly, Martin. The biggest drivers for the recent increase in demand has been big projects, big gas projects, which are coming on Barossa and Scarborough project, driving a demand. And also, I think the drilling outlook is a little bit more buoyant than it has been over the last few years. So it is as busy now as it has been for 4 or 5 years in Australia.
Do you see other projects coming through Bass Strait, Northwest Australia, Timor Sea, for example?
The Timor Sea, there's some talk about Sunrise coming through. The biggest unsanctioned project we have on our radar is the Dorado project, which is a Santos project off Port Hedland, which is a big integrated development. There's also a fair bit of talk at the moment about decommissioning the Bass Strait fields of Esso, which is, once that happens, probably 2 to 3 years hence, will be a really big job.
Okay. What is required for some of these huge projects? Scarborough being Deepwater and very remote, for example.
In vessel-wise?
Vessel-wise.
Yeah. So,
infrastructure-wise.
well, so for example, Scarborough has 3 big packages. McDermott's are building the floating processing unit, which then will be towed into place, big mooring chains put down, and then risers hooked up to that. Subsea 7 are doing the surf package, so they'll be manufacturing the risers, installing them, hooking them up to the pipelines, Saipem, and then laying a 200 kilometre very large diameter pipe from the shore all the way out to the field, using the Castorone and the Endeavour lay barge for the shallow water stuff. Each of those spreads will have a number of OSVs supporting them.
And for Barrows, what type of infrastructure is required there?
For Barossa?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's an FPSO coming in, so that'll be need to tow in place. Another surf package from Subsea 7, with some tug and barge support. All seas are doing the pipe lay for that, so they'll have PSVs working for them as well.
So bringing all that in and also decommissioning, what are the requirements for vessels going forward?
So we think it'll be fairly sustained for the next 2 to 3 years. Project vessels, and coming and going. And then we expect that to dovetail in fairly well with the startup of offshore wind in Australia, which we're projecting to start in about 3 years' time.
And also looking at the decommissioning side of things, what do you think are going to be the sort of vessel requirements for those projects?
Decommissioning is very hard to schedule and a bit sporadic. We're currently mobilising for a project with Riviera, where we'll be towing a barge down to take a mid-water riser on board, so that will require a barge and 3 tugs to support that project. So they do tend to be tug and barge work, but the larger vessels also need supply. So it's a varied spread.
You mentioned fixed and floating winds, 3 to 5 years' time. So that might be the time frame. What do you think are going to be the vessel requirements?
Yeah, we talked about this in the conference, I think. For floating wind to set the anchors, the pontoons are massive. You need really big tugs to do that. The people who know a lot more about this than I do, who I speak to, say they haven't quite cracked the economics of floating wind yet. That we have the technology. It's not that complicated technology-wise, but the economics are really tricky. So the first phase in Australia will be shallow water fixed turbines.
Okay. And what's the future for MMA Offshore?
We're having a good year. Everyone's talking about nice cash coming in. We're pretty committed to continuing to work in Taiwan and to be a regional player in Southeast Asia as well as working in Australia.